Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a time when your worst nightmare wasn't missing the Wi-Fi password or running out of snacks. It was something far darker. You wake up in the middle of the night to coughing, deep, wet, rattling. It's not coming from your own throat, but the next room over. You shuffle to check it out, only to find someone burning with fever, pupils wide, whispering nonsense through cracked lips. Their neck bulges. Their armpits bulge. Something is very wrong. This is how it begins. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is awake, wandering the dark with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and suddenly you're in the 14th century, where night falls hard and silence means danger. The wind is damp with rot. The ground crunches, not snow, but straw soaked in who knows what. Someone somewhere is always moaning. You live in a town crowded and grimy, with animals and humans packed together like they share a single immune system. Spoiler. It's not working. But you're used to things being rough. Famine rolled through a few years back, thinning out your neighbours. War's always nearby, whether it's kingdoms clashing or a bar fight that escalates with a pitchfork. You cough once and everyone steps back. Not just because they're scared, but because it reminds them of what they saw last week and the week before. Historians still argue whether the plague came earlier in whispers, subtle, isolated deaths, or if it burst in suddenly, loud and unmistakable. Either way, by the time it's in your town, it's already too late. The world feels smaller now. Trade is booming, oddly enough. Fleets crisscross the Mediterranean, hauling spices, silk, and, unbeknownst to anyone yet, rats. You've seen them. Twitchy little shadows in the alleys, chewing on refuse and slipping through drain holes. No big deal. Just rats. You scrape together your dinner. Barley bread, maybe some dried fish if you're lucky. You pray, not because you're pious, but because, honestly, what else do you have? The church bell rings, again. That's the third death today, and it's not even noon. You find yourself whispering names under your breath. Not prayers, just names. People you saw yesterday. Gone. Your neighbour thinks it's punishment. Another says it's the end of the world. Someone else blames bad air. You don't know what to believe. But the real terror doesn't come from the dead, it's from the not dead yet. The ones who cough, then swell, then scream, then nothing. A weird thing happens. People stop knocking on doors. You walk down the street and hear nothing but wind. The door is open. You don't go in. You already know what's behind it. You try to sleep. Maybe this was all just a dream. But the dog won't stop barking. You peer out and see a cart. Wooden wheels squeaking. A man pulling it alone. You know what he's collecting. The smell is everywhere. It coats your nose, clings to your hair, seeps into your bedding. No one tells you what to do, because no one knows. The priests are tired. The doctors stopped showing up. You tie a rag around your face, not because it works, but because it feels like doing something. Remember when you used to visit your cousin in the next village? Not anymore. They burned the bridge. Literally. You hear someone singing, high-pitched, eerie, a lullaby. No, it's the chant of a death procession. Children leading it, some blindfolded. You back away. You'd rather not know what comes next. But it finds you anyway. The fever, the weight in your chest. Your armpit feels tender. You try to ignore it. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you pulled a muscle. But then you see your reflection in a pail of water, and your eyes are rimmed red, your lips pale, your skin blotched. You know, even now, people try things. One guy swears onion paste helps. Another drinks vinegar and sleeps standing up. Your aunt prays harder. Your uncle tries to leave. He doesn't make it far. Historians still debate how many actually died. Some say a third of Europe, others go higher. But it's not about numbers when you're inside it. It's about silence where a family used to be. It's about a playground overgrown with weeds and bones. It's about how even time seems to slow, watching you from the corner. And the worst part, you're starting to forget how it used to feel, being safe. Breathing deep, laughing out loud, hugging someone without fear. You lie still, hoping it's not real. But outside, the coughing starts again, and you know this night's not over. Not by a long shot. You step outside before dawn, hoping the cool air will clear your head. But even the air feels thick, like it's holding its breath. You glance around, chimneys that once coughed smoke now sit still. No morning bread smells, no animals stirring, no market noise. You're standing in a ghost town, but the bodies haven't all hit the ground yet. The year is 1347, and if this were a movie, this would be your establishing shot. The wide-angle horror of a continent waiting to be crushed. Europe looks peaceful from a distance. Crops wave in the wind, rivers glint in the sun. But zoom in closer, and you'll see the cracks. Everything's tired. Starved. Ready to fall. You pass fields left half-harvested. That's the legacy of the Great Famine from a few decades ago. The rains didn't stop, the crops drowned, and hunger gnawed through the population. So when the plague arrived, most people weren't just vulnerable, they were already on the edge. Your immune system, running on fumes. You follow the road through a muddy village. Every house is pressed tight against the next, with only slivers of street between them. Windows? Tiny. Airflow? Non-existent. You share your space with goats, chickens, and more than a few rats. Privacy isn't a thing. Cleanliness isn't either. You wash maybe once a week, if the weather's kind. And toilets? Let's just say gravity and an open trench. And yet, life goes on. Kids still chase pigs in the alleys. Priests still ring bells. But now there's a tension, like a storm cloud hovering just out of reach. You know something's coming. You just don't know what it looks like yet. Historians still argue whether trade expansion or urbanization was more responsible for the plague's rapid spread. Honestly, both. Europe in the 14th century is one big open gate. Thanks to the Mongol Empire, the Silk Road is booming again. Goods, people, and germs flow freely from China to Crimea and beyond. You're living in the first age of global traffic, and no one's ready for what's hitching a ride. You head to the town square. The usual chaos, merchants yelling, kids stealing apples, dogs begging for scraps. But something's off. A traveller from the port is slumped against a cart, sweating hard. He mutters something about a ship that arrived full of death. No one listens. He's ignored, like a drunk mumbling nonsense. And then, as if on cue, a bell rings again. Another death. That's 4 this week. You're used to death. Everyone is. But this feels different. Faster. Hungrier. It's like the sickness wants to be noticed. News spreads slowly, but stories from the east start trickling in. Whispers of entire cities emptied overnight. Some say it's divine punishment. Others blame distant wars. A few mutter about the wind carrying poison, or comets, because of course it's the stars' fault. But you're starting to piece it together. Ships. Rats. People coughing and bleeding and vanishing within days. Whatever it is, it's already here. Quirky detail. In some places, people actually believed bad smells caused illness. So they'd carry sweet herbs in pouches or sniff flowers to protect themselves. One guy insisted keeping a goat indoors would absorb the illness. You don't want to know how that turned out. You visit your cousin in the next village over. She has that look, the one that says she's heard things, dark things. She tells you that her priest warned the plague as a sign of the Last Judgment, that the only solution is to repent. You wonder if that means helping others or hiding in your cellar. You choose the cellar, and here's the cruelest part. People are moving more than ever. Trade routes crisscross the continent. Soldiers shift between campaigns. Pilgrims hike to holy sites. Merchants deliver spices and cloth and, fleas. Every step someone takes carries the plague further. You try to stay hopeful. Maybe it'll pass you by. Maybe your village is too small, too tucked away. But then the baker doesn't show up, and the blacksmith's daughter collapses in the road. And when you visit the town scribe, he's gone, his house sealed with red paint. You lie awake that night, trying not to imagine the fever climbing into your own bones. You think about how quickly things unravel, how one ship, just one, can change the fate of millions, and how the world, already weakened by hunger and war, never stood a chance. You want to believe this is temporary, but deep down, you know better. You saw the signs before anyone said the word plague. You felt it in the way people stopped laughing, in how the dogs started howling longer at night, in the heavy silence between church bells. And the worst thing, you know tomorrow the square will be quieter still. You wake to shouting, not the kind that means trouble, but the kind that means something's happened. You push open the window, squinting into the morning light. Down the hill, a crowd gathers by the river. You throw on whatever's closest and follow the noise. The smell hits you first. Fish, tar, and something underneath that makes your stomach twist. Dock workers pace and mutter. Soldiers with halberds block the gangway to a recently arrived ship. The sails hang limp. The hull creaks like it's exhaling its last breath. But no one's unloading cargo. In fact, no one's coming off at all. You inch closer and overhear a merchant say, "They've been dead for days." Sevens. A ship from the Crimea has drifted in. No greeting. No flag. Just a skeleton crew. Literally. The living ones are gaunt, hollow-eyed, covered in blackened boils and dried blood. One collapses as soon as his feet hit the dock, and that's when someone sees them. The rats. They pour off the ship like spilled ink. Not in panic, more like they know where they're going. You step back. Too late. One scurries past your boot. Another vanishes into the shadows between crates. Historians still argue whether these Genoese trade ships were the first to carry the Black Death into Europe. What's not debated is what happened next. Those ports, Messina, Genoa, Venice, flared up like kindling. From there, it raced northward like fire-licking dry timber. You walk home faster than usual, ears ringing. Behind you, a priest is already reciting prayers over the dead. You pass a man vomiting into the street, a woman yelling at a rat, and a child sobbing for someone you don't see. That night, you dream of scratching. Because here's the secret. It's not just people that spread the plague. It's fleas. You sit by the hearth, staring at your ankle. It itches. You scratch. Still itches. You tell yourself it's just nerves. But in the corners of the room, the shadows move wrong. Like something small is hopping. Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the Black Death, has no legs, no teeth, no mind. But it's a master of travel. It infects fleas, who feed on infected rodents. When the rodent dies, the flea needs a new host, fast. That's you. Fleas are weird little monsters. Their mouthparts are like tiny syringes. When infected, they get blocked, meaning the bacteria clog their digestive tracts, so they keep biting and vomiting up plague-filled blood. It's basically biological backwash. You try not to think about that as you feel another tickle on your calf. Quirky fact. Some people tried releasing more fleas intentionally, on cats. They thought flea-bitten cats absorbed the sickness. Turns out, the fleas just moved house. But even if you avoid the ship, the docks, the rats, you're not safe. Not even close. The infection spreads with terrifying speed. A single bite, a single cough, a single touch can send it racing through your bloodstream. Your lymph nodes swell, armpits, groin, neck, turning into dark, painful lumps called buboes. You develop a fever so high, you start seeing things. Then vomiting. Delirium. Sometimes gangrene, turning fingers and toes black. Within a few days, your body just gives up. Some people linger. Others drop in hours. No pattern. No mercy. By now, your town has heard. The ship has been quarantined, sort of. They burned the dock warehouse, lit incense in the streets, and nailed shut a few infected houses. But there's no coordinated plan. No real understanding of what's happening. You might as well fight a hurricane with a broom. You meet with your cousin again. Remember her? She looks worse. Not sick, just worn down. She says something's changed in people. They're not just scared. They're suspicious. No one wants to touch money, bread, even prayer books. Entire families are sealing themselves inside their homes, hoping to outlast whatever's coming. You know how that ends. Historians still wonder how so many ships, clearly infected, were allowed to dock. The best guess? Desperation. Port cities depended on trade. Turn away a fleet, and you lose food, goods, coin. So they gambled and lost. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a bucket of water. You look older. Sleep deprived. There's a faint rash on your neck. You tell yourself it's nothing. You remember the rats again. The ship. The crew. The silence. And now you realise the plague isn't just here. It's moving. It jumped from fleas to rats, from rats to you, and now from you to the next town. That cart leaving the village this morning? It carried grain, tools, and a family with one very pale child. You light a candle, not because it helps, but because the dark is worse, and the itch on your ankle is back. You lie flat on your back, staring at the wooden beams overhead, trying to convince yourself it's just a cold. A chill rattles through your chest, and your breath whistles like a bellows. You press your hand to your forehead. Burning. Your shirt sticks to your skin. Not great signs? Someone knocks on your door. You don't answer. Whoever it is waits, then shuffles away. You hear the crunch of straw beneath their boots fade into silence. That's the new normal. No one pushes. No one lingers. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and wince. The muscles in your back feel like twisted rope. You force yourself up. You need water. Something. Anything. On the table beside you is a cloth bundle. Someone left you food. Or poison. Who knows anymore? You unwrap it. Dry bread and a pear. You take a bite. Can't taste it. You chew anyway. And then you see it. The lump. Just beneath your arm, where the skin is tender. It's swollen and hot. You press it, and a jolt shoots through your side. You gasp. You know what it is. This is what they mean when they say bubonic. The bubo is your body's white flag. It's a swollen lymph node filled with pus, blood, and bacteria. It's red, then purple, then black. Some grow to the size of eggs. Sometimes they burst. Sometimes they don't. You pray for the former. You reach for something, anything, to help. That's when you remember the local barber surgeon. Not exactly a doctor, but he owns knives. You've seen him pull teeth and drain abscesses. You decide to try. You stumble through the muddy streets, each step dragging like you're walking underwater. The surgeon's house is marked with a crude red cross. Inside, he wears an apron so stained it looks like a butcher's rag. Probably is. He doesn't say much. just nods and gestures for you to sit. He lights a fire, sharpens a blade, and begins. You bite down on a strap of leather. The knife is not clean. The bucket is not sterile. But there's no choice. He lances the bubo. The pain is lightning. You scream, then choke on it. He squeezes. Blood and yellow fluid splatter the floor. He says something about balance. You don't hear it. You're somewhere else. And here's the kicker. It might help. Or it might make things worse. Historians still argue whether bloodletting and lancing buboes helped reduce the death toll, or simply spread the infection further. There were no standards, no antiseptic, no gloves. Just knives and blind hope. Quirky fact. Some doctors suggested rubbing onions, herbs, or even dead animals on the buboes. One Londoner supposedly carried around a dead pigeon and slapped it against his lump twice a day. You try not to think about the logistics of that. You limp home, sore and shaking. You collapse into your cot, unsure if you feel better or worse. But at least the pressure is gone. For now, you dream of rivers made of pus, of rats wearing masks, of people whispering your name from behind walls. When you wake, your fever is worse. You're hallucinating. Pretty sure your mother walked through the wall just now. She's been dead for 3 years. You drink water. Vomit. Try again. Keep it down. People used to turn to medicine for answers. Not anymore. Most of the real doctors fled when things got bad. What's left are barbers, herbalists, and clergy, none of whom have a clue what they're dealing with. They go through the motions, repeat Latin phrases, apply hot poultices, bleed people dry. You curl up and pull the blanket tight. It feels like something's gnawing at your insides. Across town, someone lights a pyre. You smell it through the cracks in your wall. The dead don't wait for coffins now. Historians believe the mortality rate for untreated bubonic plague hovered between 50 and 60%. With treatment, maybe slightly less. If you were lucky. If your immune system fought like a bear and you had access to the few herbs that might help, like theriac or wormwood. You hear footsteps again. Someone outside your house. They pause, then keep walking. You don't call out. Every town had their own routine for dealing with the sick. Some boarded up infected homes, nailing the door shut and painting symbols to warn others. Some set up lazarettos, quarantine zones outside the city. But they filled up fast. Then came the burnings. You pull your blanket tighter. Your skin is ice and fire. You feel the bubo again, hot, swollen, angry. You whisper to it, not yet. Sevens. A cat jumps onto your windowsill, stares at you, doesn't blink. You fall asleep to the sound of bells. Not the church kind, the funeral kind. The town crier has worn out his voice. He doesn't even announce names anymore, just numbers. And you? You're not sure what tomorrow looks like. But you know your odds aren't great. Still, the bubo hasn't burst again. That's something. You wake to sunlight, and for a moment, you believe you've survived. The fever's lower. The pounding in your skull has faded to a dull hum. You stretch, cautiously. The bubo is still there, sore but smaller. A win? Maybe. But then you remember yesterday, and the day before, and you hear it again. Chanting. You shuffle to the window. In the square, a crowd gathers. But not for trade, or news, or executions. This is something stranger. A man in long robes stands on a barrel, arms raised toward the sky. Around him, others kneel, heads bowed. Some wear rags soaked in what looks like ash. One bangs a tambourine. Another reads from a parchment so tattered it might as well be whispering nonsense. They're not praying exactly, they're performing. Astrology is back in style. Your town's doctor vanished 2 weeks ago, and in his place, You now have celestial interpreters. These people don't ask where it hurts. They ask when you were born, what planets were in retrograde, and how Saturn feels about your spleen. You rub your temples. Not from skepticism, but from the actual headache this is giving you. See, back then, medicine and astrology weren't opposites. They were tangled together like noodles in broth. People genuinely believed the stars dictated the body's balance. Mars ruled the blood. Saturn governed melancholy. If there was a strange alignment, you could expect disease. The plague? Well, that had to be the result of a particularly nasty celestial conjunction. Historians still debate how widespread this belief was among common folk, but in university towns like Paris and Bologna, astrology was science. Legitimate, charted, respected, and very, very wrong. One famous medical faculty even published a report blaming the plague on the conjunction of Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter in Aquarius. You know, because hot, dry Mars plus cold, wet Saturn equals explosive pus or something. You limp outside for fresh air. The breeze is better than incense. Someone nearby burns herbs in a pot, muttering incantations. You try not to breathe too deeply. Not because of the plague, but because it smells like burnt goat hair and spoiled ale. A boy walks past wearing a necklace of garlic and dried roses. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly, like he's figured it all out. You want to believe him? Quirky tidbit? In some places, people believed the plague was carried on beams of light, so they covered windows and walked only at night. Imagine your life already falling apart, and now you're doing it in the dark. You pass by the local apothecary. He's shut his doors, but a note hangs on the post. Back in 2 days, looking for fresh unicorn horn. You don't laugh. He might be serious. He might be dead. Inside the church, candles flicker under a ceiling heavy with incense smoke. A priest stands before a half-empty room, offering blessings. You notice he doesn't touch anyone anymore. Just waves a hand, mutters something, and moves on. You sit in the back. You don't know what you believe, but the silence is comforting. A woman kneels beside you and whispers that the planets are shifting, that a new star appeared last night near Orion, that it means salvation, or doom. Hard to say. You nod politely and don't ask questions. Back outside, people talk of heat and moisture and the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much phlegm? That's your problem. Too little blood? That's your cousin's. One woman swears the plague targets people with unbalanced temperaments. You smile faintly, wondering what the plague would make of your anxiety and dry sarcasm. Historians still question whether this obsession with celestial causes helped or hurt. On one hand, it gave people a way to process the unexplainable. On the other, it distracted from practical ideas, like isolation or, I don't know, not licking toads. You hobble to the edge of town. Farmers stand at the crossroads arguing over whether to bury their dead in the usual spot, or just start digging a new pit. One of them swears the moon turned red last night. Bad omen. Always is. That night, you sit outside, wrapped in a cloak, staring at the stars. They look so peaceful, so distant. You wonder if they're watching all this with detached curiosity, like gods sipping wine as the ants burn. You remember the chanting from earlier. You can still hear it faintly, drifting on the wind. Words in Latin, or maybe just made-up syllables. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it sounds like control, like someone knows what's happening. And when everything is falling apart, that's worth everything. You lie back, letting the stars blur into fog. Someone once told you the heavens are like a great clock, ticking toward a fate we can't escape. You never believed it. Now, you're not so sure. You jolt awake at dawn, heart thudding. Not from a dream, but from a bite. You scratch your leg through the blanket. It's nothing. Just a bug. Except, you know better. Everyone does now. You kick off the sheet and inspect your ankle. There it is. A tiny red dot with a dark centre. Small, insignificant, absolutely deadly. The flea has done its job. You stare at it for a long time. This little thing, barely visible, might have just handed you a death sentence. Not with a roar, not with a sword, but with a bite that feels like nothing at all. That's how Yersinia pestis works. It doesn't need drama. It thrives in silence. You shuffle to the hearth and stoke the embers. Might as well stay warm while you wait to find out if you're dying. That's the new daily routine now. Wake. Breathe. Inventory your symptoms. Itchy bite. Check. Fever. Not yet. Buboes. Still clear. Existential dread. Oh, absolutely. Historians still argue about exactly how long Yersinia pestis can survive in the wild, particularly inside its tiny flea taxi. Some claim the bacteria die off within a week. Others suggest that under the right damp, cool, shaded conditions, it can last for months. That kind of flexibility is what makes it so good at killing. Fleas love a good warm body, but they're not picky. Rat, dog, human, it's all fine dining to them. When they latch onto an infected host, they ingest blood filled with Y. Pestis. The bacteria don't just pass through, they clog the flea's digestive tract. It can't swallow anymore, so it vomits, while biting, into your bloodstream. Yup, vomit. In your blood. You scratch the bite again, suddenly queasy. Quirky sidebar. During outbreaks, some towns tried powdering themselves with flour or ash to repel fleas. Others burned cedar wood or wore amulets filled with mercury. One Parisian woman claimed coating her arms in pig fat kept her invisible to fleas. We don't know if it worked, but we do know she smelled unforgettable. You head outside, keeping your cloak tight. Not from cold, from paranoia. The town is quieter than yesterday. Again. At this rate, you'll be the only one talking to yourself in the square by next week. You wander toward the bakery. Closed. The miller's? Boarded up. The only shop still open is the healer's hut, and the line outside wraps around the building. You hear whispers. Fever. Coughing. Swollen neck. No one says the word, but they're all thinking it. The fleas don't need permission. They're already ahead of you. They travel in the fur of rats, yes, but also on clothes, sacks of grain, bundles of hay, even inside the seams of boots. Anywhere there's a dark, warm fold, there's a chance for a hitchhiker. A peasant travelling by cart? That's a flea bus. A noblewoman in 10 layers of velvet? That's a mobile flea mansion. You remember that ship at the dock, the one with the rats pouring off it like water. Every single one of those rats carried fleas, and those fleas had no loyalty. Once the rats died, which they did, horribly, the fleas leapt ship and found new targets. And now they're here, everywhere. They live in the hay of your mattress, in the collars of your coat, in the hair behind your ear. You feel a crawling sensation under your collar. You slap it hard. Nothing. Or maybe something. Historians still wonder whether the rat flea, Xenocilla chiopes, was the only vector. Some argue that human fleas and lice played an even bigger role, especially in colder regions where rats weren't common. The debate rages in academic circles. In your town, no one's waiting on a research paper. They just want it to stop. Someone rushes past you, clutching their arm. You glimpse a bulge under the sleeve. A bubo. She doesn't stop. Doesn't even look at you. Just keeps running. You head back home and strip off your clothes. Shake them out. Inspect every seam. You boil water, dip your shirt in it. Steam rises in thick white waves. You don't know if it helps, but it feels like control, like action. You sleep that night with your sleeves rolled down and your ankles wrapped in cloth. You've heard that layering herbs inside your socks helps. You've also heard that only the wicked fall ill. One of those things seems easier to test. You fall asleep mid-prayer, mid-scratch, mid-thought, and you dream of fleas. Fleas the size of dogs. Fleas in suits. Fleas sitting around a council table, deciding your fate. They vote unanimously. You're next. You wake drenched in sweat. The bite is still there. Bigger now. You feel your own forehead. Still warm. Not boiling. Yet. You force yourself up. The fleas may be tiny, but their damage is vast. Behind every door in your town, they've made their presence known. One nibble at a time. You see a child with a rash. A man curled up in the gutter. A dog scratching wildly. Every creature in this town is under siege. And the enemy is so small, it walks between your eyelashes. You sit on the edge of a well, watching a rat clean its whiskers. It's a black rat, Rattus rattus, sleek, almost cute if you squint hard and ignore literally everything about the past month. The rat pauses, glances your way, then darts into a crack in the stone wall. Gone. You used to think the plague was just about rats and fleas. One furry villain, one itchy sidekick. But now you're not so sure. You've seen people drop in villages where no rats roam. You've watched travellers get sick in wide open fields with no sewer in sight. So what's really spreading it? You close your eyes and retrace the routes. Ships, sure. But what about caravans? Messengers? Merchants with carts piled high with spices, salt, and bolts of fabric. All perfect flea beds. What about people themselves? Historians still argue over the primary transmission routes. Some say the black rats and their fleas were the star players. Others point to body lice, or even the plague turning airborne under the right conditions. The reality? Probably a combo platter of pestilence. Rats, fleas, lice, infected humans, and every possible hand-me-down cloak in between. You remember that your cousin's friend got sick days after hugging a traveller from a distant town. She didn't go near any rats, but she did borrow the woman's shawl, the one stuffed with lavender and rabbit fur. Cosy. And, you now suspect, crawling. You head into the woods for firewood. Not because you need it, but because it's away from people. And you're starting to think people are part of the problem. You step lightly, scanning the ground. You pass a squirrel with a scabby patch on its side. You keep walking. At this point, you trust squirrels as much as monks. Back in town, a new rumour floats through the air. Dogs are immune. Someone else says cats carry the plague in their breath. A third person insists pigeons are the source, because they never stop watching. You give the pigeon on the roof a dirty look, just in case. Quirky fact. In Marseille, during a later outbreak, authorities actually banned cats and dogs, thinking they spread disease. Turns out, they were the best rat hunters they had. Oops. You duck into the tanner's shed. It smells like sulphur, blood, and feet. He's gone, but his tools remain. You wrap a leather strap around your arm, tight. You heard it might trap the plague. Doesn't matter if it's true. It just feels like doing something. That's the maddening part. You're fighting something you can't see, can't touch, can't predict. You can only watch where it's been. And you're starting to see a pattern. It travels along routes of connection. Trade routes. Pilgrimage trails. Army roads. Wherever people go, it follows. You spot a monk scribbling in the churchyard. He's tracking the deaths, mapping them with charcoal on parchment. It spreads like water spilled on stone, he murmurs without looking up. You nod. That feels right. By now, people are burning more than incense. They're torching clothes, furniture, entire homes. One man dug a trench around his house and lined it with oil. He lights it every night, like a castle moat of flame. No one visits him anymore. Honestly, he might be onto something. Historians debate whether burning clothing and bedding made any real difference. Probably not, but psychologically, huge. Fire feels like control. It's dramatic. Final. Cleansing. Like maybe you can scare the fleas away with spectacle. You walk by the town well again. A notice hangs beside it. Boil all water. You're impressed. That almost sounds modern. Then you hear someone say the water itself is angry. Never mind. Still, people try. They hang flowers in doorways, place rosemary in shoes, sprinkle vinegar on coins. One man swears he hasn't caught the plague because he drinks nothing but beer. You consider joining his cult. You rest under a tree and close your eyes. A soft breeze brushes your skin. You hear nothing but leaves and your own breathing. No coughing. No shouting. No bells. For a moment, peace. Then something crawls across your neck. You slap it. Hard. You hold up your hand. A squashed flea. It's always there. You open your eyes, suddenly aware that it's not about one rat or one flea. The plague is moving through everything. Through cloth, through contact, through stories. A tapestry of transmission. You head back to town and spot a group carrying a sick man on a wooden door. He's sweating, muttering, barely conscious. No one speaks. They carry him to the edge of town, to a hastily built hut in the fields. They leave him there, then walk away. The plague may have started with rats, but now it rides on fear. You reach home and kick off your boots. Shake them out. Wash your hands in ash water. You hang your cloak outside, in the sun, because someone told you sunlight kills the disease. Historians have noted that Yersinia pestis can't survive long in heat and dryness. But good luck telling that to anyone standing in a humid kitchen, dripping with sweat and dread. You curl into your blanket, wrap your legs tight, and whisper one last thought before sleep claims you. Sevens, it's not just the rats anymore. It's us. You sit alone by your hearth, hands tucked between your knees, eyes fixed on the fire. It pops and crackles like it's trying to speak, but you're not listening to it. You're listening to the silence outside. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of absence. There's no dog barking, no baby crying, no blacksmith hammering at the forge. Just a low wind through boarded shutters and, somewhere far off, the creak of a cart moving very slowly. Probably another body run. You've been living with this thing for weeks now. Maybe months. Time has blurred. At first, it was just a few people coughing. Then it was fevers and buboes. Now, it's something else entirely. The plague has evolved, like it's tired of playing slow. What you're hearing about now is different. People dropping within hours of the first cough. No swellings. No time to bleed or blister or even beg for help. Just a sharp pain, a cough, and collapse. It's not just bubonic anymore. It's pneumonic, and it doesn't wait. You step outside to check on your neighbour. She was coughing yesterday. Her door is open now. Not a good sign. You don't go in. Historians still argue about the spread of pneumonic plague, whether it was common or just one of many terrifying offshoots, but one thing is clear. This version moves fast. It attacks the lungs. It rides the breath. A cough from someone infected can fill the air with bacteria. You don't need a flea. You don't need a rat. You just need to stand too close. You wrap a scarf around your mouth. You don't know if it helps. Everyone's doing it now. Scraps of fabric soaked in rosewater, vinegar, wine, even urine. Anything strong enough to burn the stink out of your nose is now considered medicine. Across the lane, 2 people carry a girl, maybe 10 years old, into the chapel. Her lips are blue. She isn't moving. You think back to that sailor from the ship, the one who collapsed on the dock. You remember how quickly he went from walking to writhing to nothing. You thought it was the fever. Now you wonder if it was this. Some say the air is poisoned, that it carries invisible daggers, that a foul miasma has drifted over Europe, thickening in valleys, curling through alleys, seeping into windows, and if you breathe it, you die. That's not far from the truth, but it's not a gas. It's people. You see it happen in real time. A man helping his wife carry water. He's coughing by morning. A midwife tending to the sick, gone by the next day. A priest giving last rites to 3 victims. He doesn't make it to lunch. You sit at your window, watching the plague take shortcuts. It used to crawl through blood. Now it soars on breath. And there's a third version too, just to keep things spicy. Septicemic. This one skips the buboes. It dives straight into your bloodstream and paints your skin purple, then black. You bleed from your gums. Your fingertips rot while you're still breathing. Sometimes people die before they even realise they're sick. You stare at your hands. Fine for now. Still pink. Still functional. But for how long? Quirky tidbit. One medieval account mentions a woman who bled from her eyes, then danced for 10 minutes before collapsing. Scholars think this was a septicemic case, possibly even embellished. But when the bar is that low, who needs exaggeration? You turn away from the window. Your own throat itches now. Dry? Probably just the air. Or maybe not. You boil water and sip slowly. You think about all the ways this thing is changing. Morphing. It's like it wants to be unstoppable. And in a world without antibiotics, hospitals, or even basic hand washing, it is. Historians debate whether the 3 strains emerged separately or all at once, like a grim lottery. One theory says the bubonic form was the gateway, the first knock on the door. Once it found enough hosts, it morphed, turned airborne, and then bloodborne. Others believe these forms were always present, just misunderstood. Either way, it doesn't matter to you. What matters is that it's not consistent. One neighbour gets a fever and swells for days. Another drops after a cough and a nosebleed. No 2 cases look exactly alike. It's chaos wearing a medical mask. You pass a boy sobbing in the street. His mother is lying on the ground, face turned to the wall. No blood, no swelling, just still. He touches her shoulder. You stop him. You don't even think, just yank him away. He screams. You let him. You find yourself checking your breath every few minutes now. Exhale. Inhale. Still smooth. No rattling. No pain. You try not to obsess, but it's hard not to when your own lungs are the battleground. That night, you sleep sitting up, back against the wall, a scarf tied over your mouth. You don't dream. You don't want to. And when you wake up, you take the deepest breath you can manage, just to make sure you still can. You don't even remember what day it is anymore, or what it's supposed to feel like when a morning doesn't start with another death. You sit at the edge of the town square. It used to be loud, bustling, chaotic. Now it echoes like a tomb. A cart creaks by, one of the plague carts. The driver's face is wrapped in cloth, his eyes glazed over. He doesn't even call out anymore. There's no point. People leave the dead by the door now, like firewood for pickup. But today, something's different. You feel it. It's not just illness now. It's fear. Not creeping anymore, running. A woman sprints past you barefoot, shrieking something about poisoned bread. You don't see who she's running from. Or 2, she just vanishes down the alley. 2 men argue over water near the well. Not ownership, safety. One swears it's cursed. The other says it's holy. Neither drinks it. And down by the church, a crowd forms. Not for prayer, for blame. Fear spreads faster than the disease now. Historians still debate how much of the Black Death's devastation came from the illness itself, and how much from the hysteria that followed. Some scholars argue fear was the true second plague. One that turned neighbours into enemies, and every cough into a potential confession. You clutch your scarf tighter around your face and slip away from the square. The tension is thick. One wrong word, one wrong look, and you'll be the next target. And not for burial, for rage. You duck into an alley and listen. You hear doors slam, a baby crying, someone shouting the word witch. Sevens. It starts with rumours that the well was poisoned, that the town baker never gets sick because he's in league with the devil, that a woman down the lane hasn't prayed once, not even during all this death. People are panicking, and panic is contagious. You head to the edge of town to check on the old miller. He used to be the calm one, always had a joke or a riddle. Today he's standing in his yard, staring at the sun. "It's blinking," he says. That means it's almost over. Sevens. You nod, not sure what else to say. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, people believed the plague caused madness in those it spared. Survivors who never got sick were often accused of witchcraft, poisoning, or necromancy. One man in Florence was beaten for laughing too much in a tavern. His only crime? He was still capable of joy. You sit on a fallen log and breathe slowly through your scarf. The air smells like smoke and vinegar. Someone's burning clothes again. You remember how fast it all moved. One sailor, one rat, one flea. And then, weeks later, your whole region is unrecognisable. You've lost count of how many have died, how many have vanished in the night. You remember your friend Tomas. He made a joke the day the plague reached town. Called it the rich man's diet. Takes the weight right off. He laughed. 2 days later, his house was boarded shut. Now, no one laughs. No one touches. You saw a man drop his daughter's doll in the street and walk away, like it was soaked in acid. You saw another person slap their own brother for coughing. Historians note that in many cities, records just stop. Entire sections of birth and death ledgers are blank. Not from carelessness, but from the collapse of order. Fear tore down the bureaucracies. The scribes either died or ran. Who had time to write when the world was falling apart? You pass by the mayor's house. Empty. The door hangs open. His coat is still on the rack. He fled days ago. Took the town ledger with him. Said he was preserving history. No one's seen him since. A group walks past you now, all in matching robes, heads shaved, chanting. You've heard of them, wandering penitents. They whip themselves, sing, cry, beg forgiveness. They say the plague is divine punishment. That only pain will save the world. You nod as they pass, trying not to meet their eyes. They look half-starved, eyes glassy, skin raw. But you can't help but wonder, why are they still healthy? You slip back inside your house and shut the door. You don't feel sick. Not yet. But your heart won't stop racing. Every sound is a threat. Every knock is a verdict. You boil water, dip a cloth in it, and press it to your neck. No swelling. Not today. But still, something itches under your skin, not physical. Something electric. An alertness that won't fade. You remember when people used to cry at funerals. Now they just lower their eyes and move on. Grief has no room left. Fear has taken up all the space. That night, you lie on the floor. Bed feels too risky, too soft. You keep one ear tuned to the window. And you dream not of rats or death, but of people chasing shadows with torches. Screaming at things they can't see. Believing anything that offers comfort, or control, or just someone to blame. You wake with your pulse in your throat and realise, sevens, the plague spreads in the body, but fear spreads in the mind, and that plague might never end. The first thing you notice is the silence, the real kind, not early morning quiet, not everyone's hiding quiet, This silence feels hollow, like the town itself has stopped breathing. You step outside and scan the street. No one. Doors hang crooked, cloth banners torn, flower bundles wilted in windows. A few chickens wander around like they've claimed the place. You whisper, "Hello?" Nothing answers. This was a town once. Now, it's a memory with walls. You shuffle down the street, peeking through open doorways. You see tables still set with spoons and bread crusts. Cups left half full. A chess game paused mid-match. That eerie moment when life got interrupted and no one came back to finish. At the baker's house, flour dust still hangs in the air. His apron is on the chair. His dog sleeps in the corner, ribs sharp as knives. You back away. Quietly. Some towns died all at once. Others faded like smoke. Historians say entire villages were emptied. No survivors, no records, no explanation. Just ruins. Some were later found by travellers who reported livestock still alive, crops half-harvested, and doors swinging in the wind. It wasn't always fire or violence. Sometimes it was just quiet, creeping disappearance. You leave the main road and head up the hill to a farmhouse you remember visiting once. You knock, more out of habit than hope. No answer. Inside, someone had tried to draw wards on the walls, protective runes, maybe. They didn't work. There are 3 lumps under the blanket in the bed. You don't look closer. You sit on the stoop and pull your cloak tight. It's not even cold, but you shiver. Not from the air, from the emptiness. Quirky fact. Some towns were so thoroughly wiped out that future generations forgot they'd ever existed. Like the English village of Warren Percy, later rediscovered by archaeologists buried beneath soil and time. Its name faded from memory. You return to the road and keep walking. Eventually you come across a man digging. Alone. He doesn't look up. Just shovels dirt with methodical force. A pit yawns beside him. Long, deep, lined with the already dead. No crosses. No prayers. You nod. He nods. Nothing else is said. These are the plague pits. Mass graves. At first, people tried to bury the dead with dignity. Coffins, service, a name whispered in farewell. But soon the numbers overwhelmed the ritual. When you bury 20 people a day, every day, you run out of words. You remember the town bell. It used to ring once per death, then once per hour, then not at all because the bell ringer died. You come across another empty house. On the wall, a child's drawing, stick figures, one with a big smile, holding a flower. The rest have X's over their eyes. You press your hand to it, gently, then move on. Historians estimate that in some regions, up to 70% of the population died. That's not just a health crisis, it's a full systems collapse. With that many gone, entire industries folded. No farmers, no bakers, no scribes, no shepherds. Crops withered in fields. Cattle roamed wild. Some towns were so gutted, survivors didn't even know how to be a town anymore. You reach the church, or what's left of it. The doors hang open, candles long burned down. You step inside, expecting silence. But you hear something, faint, trembling. You follow the sound into the nave and find an old woman sitting in the pews, eyes closed, humming. She's not sick, just still here. You sit beside her without speaking. After a while, she says, they left. All of them. Even the ones who weren't dead yet. Then she chuckles softly. Didn't even take the wine. Sevens. You offer her a piece of bread from your satchel. She takes it with a nod, chews slowly, then says, you should go. There's nothing left here to haunt. Sevens. She's not wrong. You step back into the light, blinking. The sun has no idea what's going on. It shines as if the world still works, as if markets still bustle and children still chase geese in the square. But no one's left to notice. You keep walking, through fields overgrown with thistle, past barns with doors swinging loose, past wells clogged with moss, past everything that used to be something. That night, you camp beside a stream. You hear nothing but crickets and your own shallow breath. You stare at the stars and realise, even if the plague ended tomorrow, some places will never recover. They weren't just hit by the plague. They were erased. And what's scarier than death? Being forgotten. You trudge into the next town before dawn. The sun isn't up, but you can already hear it, chanting. Rhythmic. Strange. Not the usual church choir stuff. This has a beat to it, like a drum line performed by ghosts. You slip through an alley and peer into the square. A procession is moving down the street. Dozens of people, barefoot, cloaked in black. Some wear hoods. Some have their backs bare, already bleeding. They're hitting themselves, over and over. Wooden whips with knots at the end, smacking skin with each step. They chant between strikes, their voices low and steady. Latin, or maybe something older. The sound gets in your bones. This is the flagellant movement. You'd heard whispers. Groups travelling from town to town, punishing themselves in hopes of cleansing sin from the world. They say the plague is God's punishment, and the only way to fix it is to suffer. You squint at them, trying to make sense of what you're seeing. Some are old. Some are barely teens. One walks with a limp, dragging his whip behind him like a tail. Their feet bleed too. Some of their robes are stiff with dried blood, cracked like old parchment. The town watches from behind shutters and cracks in the doors. No one joins in. Not yet. Historians say the flagellant movement rose rapidly during the Black Death, especially in places where church authority collapsed or fled. They were equal parts terrifying and captivating. People saw them as holy warriors. Others saw them as outlaws. Sometimes both. You follow at a distance as the group stops in front of the chapel. They form a circle. One in the centre reads from a scroll, voice cracking with intensity. Then they whip themselves again. Harder this time. No plague pits here. Not yet. Just one burned out home and a few shuttered shops. They're hoping the performance buys them time. And for some, it works. People join them. Out of desperation. Out of guilt. Out of fear. You see a merchant hand over his coin purse and kneel in the dirt. He lifts his shirt. The flagellant hands him a whip. He strikes once. Then again. Then a third time. The crowd holds its breath. This is religion rewritten by panic. Quirky fact? Some flagellant groups carried fake papal decrees claiming their rituals had heavenly approval. One even forged a vision from an angel explaining how many lashes each town needed to avoid God's wrath. Spoiler. The number was always higher than you'd expect. You sit under a tree, watching the sun finally rise behind the chapel. The flagellants eat in silence, barely. Hard bread, some cheese, water with a hint of vinegar. You hear them mutter that suffering shouldn't taste good. You wonder what happens when they get sick. Do they stop? Do they whip harder? Do they accept it as God's final test? You follow one of them, just briefly, as he walks behind a house to relieve himself. His back is raw, striped with purple and red. You ask, quietly, why he does it. He doesn't look at you. Just says, because someone has to. Sevens. And maybe he believes it. Maybe that's the worst part. You return to the road, passing more signs of devotion twisted into desperation. People wearing iron collars. Women sleeping on stone floors. Someone nailed a rooster to their door. Symbolic. Maybe. Horrifying. Definitely. Historians still debate whether the flagellant movement actually slowed the plague in certain towns, or made things worse by spreading it. They didn't isolate. They didn't sanitize. They walked, from place to place, whipping and bleeding and chanting, leaving droplets behind. You reach a small bridge outside the village. The flagellants cross one by one, heads bowed, lashes slung over their shoulders like swords. You see a young girl run up and press a flower into one man's palm. He doesn't react. Just keeps walking, blood dripping from his fingers onto the petals. And just like that, they're gone. Down the road, toward the next town. Toward the next frightened crowd. Toward their next hopeful audience. You sit on the bridge for a while. The wood is damp. The sky is pale and soft. You don't know if their pain buys salvation, but you know it's not the cure. You head back into town, following the muddy road left by the flagellant's bleeding feet. The sun is up now, but no one's selling bread, no one's hanging laundry, and no one's laughing. What fills the streets instead is whispering, low and constant, like a swarm of bees behind every door. Something's changed. You feel it before you see it. A crowd has gathered outside the market hall. Tight, tense, eyes darting like cornered animals. You hang back, watching. In the middle of the mob, there's a man, hands bound, tunic torn, one cheek already bruised. Someone shouts, "Confess!" Another throws a rock. You don't recognize him. He's not local. But then someone near you mutters, "Jew," and everything clicks into place. You feel your stomach drop. The plague's fury has been terrifying. But this is something worse. This is people deciding that fear isn't enough anymore. They need blame. They need a villain. And they've chosen one. Historians confirm that throughout Europe, Jewish communities were attacked, exiled, and massacred during the plague. Accused of poisoning wells, conspiring with the devil, or simply being too healthy. No evidence. No logic. Just the old fuel of prejudice, poured into a crisis already burning hot. You edge back into a doorway as the crowd surges. Someone hits the accused man in the ribs with a stick. He goes down hard. They don't stop. You want to look away. You don't. You hear more names being shouted. Foreigners, beggars, lepers, even midwives. Anyone slightly different. Anyone already marginalised. It doesn't matter if they're innocent. It only matters that people are scared, and scared people punch sideways. You wander away, heart pounding. It's not just this town. You've heard of entire Jewish quarters being set on fire. Men, women, children dragged from their homes and drowned in rivers. In Strasbourg, you heard, 2,000 people were burned alive in a single day. Quirky fact. Some towns tried to protect their Jewish populations, not out of kindness, but because they were owed money. One nobleman is recorded as saying, "Do not kill them. Their debts die with them." A chilling kind of mercy. You reach the far edge of town, where the leper colony used to be. It's empty now. They were driven out last week, accused of smearing plague on door handles. The idea came from somewhere. No one knows who. But once it spread, logic had no chance. Historians still debate whether these accusations were spontaneous or orchestrated. Some believe church leaders and local elites used scapegoating to redirect attention from their own failure to protect the people. Others think it was organic, panic-breeding cruelty. Either way, the result was the same. Blood, smoke, silence. You pass by a house marked with a red X. Not for plague this time, for suspicion. The woman inside was a midwife. Someone said she knows too much about death. Someone else said she talked to cats. You don't see her anymore. The irony, of course, is that some of the accused were among the few people who understood hygiene, quarantine, and care. But knowledge isn't useful when everyone's burning the library. You sit near the town square as the sun climbs higher. A priest is preaching, not comfort, not hope, but judgment. He shouts that God is testing the faithful, that the wicked are among us, that purging must continue. People nod. Some cry. A few pick up stones. You wonder how many of them used to laugh together, share meals, trade favours. Now they watch each other like wolves. You remember your aunt telling you, long ago, fear turns neighbours into strangers, and strangers into enemies. Sevens. You didn't get it then. Now you do. You head back to your own doorstep and pause before going inside. Something about the air feels heavier. Not diseased, just poisoned in a different way. You sit and listen to the wind, and you think about all the names being forgotten, not by disease, but by fire, blade, and fear. You try to remember them, even just one. You whisper it aloud, a soft act of rebellion. And then you go inside, lock the door, bar the window, not to keep out the plague, to keep out the people. You wake to the smell of rosemary and the unmistakable clatter of horse hooves on cobblestone. That's rare now. Most animals wander loose, riderless. You peek through the shutters. A carriage rolls slowly down the main road, dark wood, gold trim, glass windows so clean it's like they've never seen dust. Inside, a face, pale, powdered, staring straight ahead, not at the town, not at the rows of abandoned stalls or the bent weather vane or the child sitting alone on the steps of the chapel. No, just forward, like they don't want to see. The rich have arrived. Or, more accurately, they're passing through. Escaping. You slip out quietly and follow at a distance. Not out of curiosity, but because you've heard the rumours. Nobles heading to their country estates. Merchants buying private physicians. Dukes walling themselves in with servants who are forbidden to leave. The rich aren't immune, but they sure try to act like they are. Historians confirm that while the plague did not discriminate by class, the responses to it absolutely did. The wealthy often fled early, carrying the plague with them into rural villages. Others paid for isolation, turning castles into quarantine zones and hiring guards to shoot anyone who approached. You pass an inn where a velvet-robed gentleman haggles with the innkeeper over clean lodgings. He offers triple the rate, says he needs a room that hasn't had poor people in it. The innkeeper laughs once, then takes the coin. Later that night, the gentleman vomits blood in the gutter. Turns out, money can't bribe bacteria. You wander past a crumbling manor house, once elegant, now covered in ivy and neglect. Inside, a woman sits in a chair, fanning herself weakly. Her dress is silk. Her cheeks are flushed. Her eyes don't focus. You recognise the symptoms. Her maid weeps softly in the corner, trying not to breathe too close. They thought the gates would protect them. They thought distance equalled immunity. They were wrong. Quirky fact. Some nobles actually built plague towers, multi-storey residences where each family lived on a separate floor, never touching. Supplies were winched up by rope. One Italian duke had his wine poured from the second story into a silver funnel to avoid peasant contact. He still died within 2 weeks. You sit in the garden of a now empty estate. The roses bloom like nothing's wrong. A marble statue of a cherub leans in permanent laughter, holding a cracked urn. You bet the sculptor never imagined that someday. This garden would be a mass grave. You remember hearing how nobles were embalmed with spices, wrapped in gold-threaded cloth, buried in stone vaults. Now, they're lucky to be buried at all. Some get thrown into the same pits as everyone else. Others die alone, locked in rooms no one dares to enter. Their servants either die first or run. Historians still puzzle over the social collapse the plague created. Class structures blurred. A scullery maid who survived became more valuable than a count who didn't. In some places, poor survivors claimed empty mansions. In others, nobles offered their titles in exchange for food or medicine. You hear a rider approach, one of the Lord's men, still in livery, sweating through his uniform. He calls out for help, says the Baron is ill, needs a doctor. Needs holy water. Needs anything? The townsfolk don't answer. They keep their shutters closed. You hear someone cough from behind a door. The rider waits a minute, then turns his horse and gallops away. No one chases him. You walk past the mayor's old house. Empty. Again. Someone has scrawled a message on the door in charcoal. We all bleed the same. You think about the nobles trying to outrun the plague in golden carriages, behind castle walls, in lavender-scented isolation. You think about the servant girls forced to nurse them, the cooks locked inside their kitchens, the boys who fanned them while they burned with fever. You think about how many of those boys died first. It wasn't just money that failed the rich. It was the illusion that money could buy space, that death would pause at a velvet rope, that disease respected a title. It didn't. You return to your home. It's small, dusty, patched in too many places, but you're still breathing, and the roof doesn't leak, and you don't need servants to die for you. You settle down with a crust of bread and a boiled onion, and you whisper to the shadows, "Sevens, the plague doesn't care what you wear, or where you sleep, or what your family crest looks like on a signet ring. It only cares that you're alive, so it can take that away." You wake up to footsteps in the street, not frantic, not heavy, just strange, rhythmic, slow, deliberate. You peek through the shutters and freeze. There he is, the plague doctor. Long black robes, gloves pulled high, a stiff hat perched low. But what catches your breath, what actually makes you press backward against the wall, is the mask. That beak. It curves like a bird of praise, long and sharp, with the round glass eyepieces like two frozen moons. He doesn't look human. He looks like something from a fever dream. You watch him move door to door, slowly, methodically. He knocks once, pauses. If no one answers, he scribbles something with chalk and moves on. If they do, well, then the real work begins. This is the doctor. You've heard about them. Maybe seen one once, at a distance. Their job is to help the sick, or count the dead, or take notes for the people who fled the cities and want updates but not exposure. Historians say the beaked mask design wasn't universal, but it's the one everyone remembers. Inside the beak, stuffed with herbs, flowers, spices, rosemary, mint, cloves, even vinegar-soaked sponges. Not for your benefit, for theirs. To block the miasma, the poisoned air they believed carried the plague. You duck back inside and watch through a crack in the wood. He kneels at a door across the square, unlatches a leather satchel, pulls out a stick. That's how they examine patients, poking from a distance, lifting cloth without touching skin. You want to believe he's here to help, but something about him feels off. Not evil, just empty. Like he's already accepted that nothing works. Quirky detail? Some plague doctors weren't doctors at all. Just people paid to look the part. Surgeons, barbers, or even local officials in costume, playing a role. Because sometimes, all a city wanted was the appearance of action. He walks into a home where you know 2 people died this week. You count the seconds. 10, 20, a minute. He comes out. No rush. Just closes the door and moves to the next. You notice something else now. He's alone. No assistant. No priest. No mourner. Just a man in leather and lenses, floating through your town like a ghost that invoices by the hour. Historians still debate how useful these doctors were. Some think they helped by keeping track of the sick, recommending quarantines, documenting symptoms. Others think they just got in the way, or worse, spread the disease further with contaminated robes and gear. You watch him stop at the bakery, the same one you used to sneak into as a kid for crusts of cheese. He scratches a mark on the door, a circle with a cross inside it. That means no survivors. You feel something clench in your chest. You don't see him give medicine. You don't hear prayers. You don't hear anything but his slow footsteps and the whisper of fabric as he moves. When he passes your house, you hold your breath. He pauses, looks at the door. You imagine he can see you through the wall. Then he moves on. You exhale slowly, like a balloon losing air. That night, you dream of beaked faces floating through your room, watching, waiting, counting. You wake in the dark and light a candle just to prove you're real. You boil water, scrub your hands, rinse your face with rose water. You know it won't save you, but it's better than lying still. Outside, someone calls for the doctor. Their voice cracks. You don't know if he answers. You think about the man inside that mask. Does he ever take it off? Does he eat? Does he sleep? What's it like to become a symbol of death while still alive? You sit at your table, listening to the wind howl past the shutter cracks, and you realise, sevens. No one trusts the doctors anymore. Not really. Their mask is too inhuman. Their tools too crude. Their visits too often a prelude to burial. And the worst part? Sometimes they walk past a door. Don't knock. Don't mark it. And you know what that means. They've already given up. You haven't left your home in 2 days. Not from illness, just exhaustion. Not the kind you cure with sleep. The kind that builds behind your eyes. That slow-rotting fatigue that tells you the world outside isn't worth walking into today. But eventually, hunger wins. It always does. You wrap your face, slide on your cloak, and step into the sun. It's quiet. Again. The birds don't even sing anymore, and the dogs have stopped barking. You make your way past boarded houses, collapsed roofs, and a wagon half submerged in mud. The sky's clear, but the town feels underwater. Then you smell it. Thick. Sweet. Rot and smoke, tangled together in the wind. The plague pits are full. You know this because you've heard the gravediggers complaining, not about the work, but the waiting. There's a line now. People dying faster than the earth can receive them. So they've started burning bodies. The smell of ash clings to your skin, your cloak, your thoughts. It chokes the streets more than the smoke itself. You pass the south end of town and find the pyres still smouldering. Stacks of wood, blackened and broken. Shapes half consumed. Some wrapped in cloth. Others just bones. No one watches the fires anymore. No rituals. No readings. They just burn. Historians tell us mass cremation was rare during the Black Death. Burial was still the default. But in places where corpses outnumbered shovels, the fire became an emergency measure. Priests complained, but even they stopped objecting when their own colleagues started piling up. You walk away quickly, mouth covered, throat burning. As you pass through the market square, you spot something absurd. A man selling bundles of herbs and flowers from a wooden cart. He waves you over. You hesitate, then approach. 2 pence for lavender and rosemary, he says, voice gravelly. 3 for a nosegay. Sevens. You look at the bundles. Tied with string. Colourful. Cheerful. Almost. You ask him if it works. He shrugs. Smells better than dead. Fair point. You give him a coin and tuck the bundle inside your cloak. The moment you do, it hits you. Your nose fills with the sharp, clean scent of crushed leaves and dried petals. It's not a cure, but it's not ash, either. That feels like a miracle. Quirky fact. That posy you just bought? Some people wore them in their sleeves. Others stuffed them in their masks, their boots, even under their pillows. The idea was that good smells could fight bad air, especially the foul miasma that many believed caused disease. It didn't work. but it gave people something to do. You pass a boy selling vinegar cloths, scraps soaked and bundled in wax paper. "Press them to your face," he says. Keeps the death out. He's maybe 9. Looks like he hasn't slept in days. You buy one. Not because you believe him, but because he believes it enough for both of you. You keep walking until you reach the chapel. Outside it, a stack of perfumed candles sits untouched, melted down by the sun. Inside, someone has laid flowers on the altar, not in vases, just strewn across the stone like spilled offerings. You sit in the pews, lightheaded from the scents clinging to your sleeves. It's strange, but comforting. You think about how much energy people are putting into smell. It's the only sense they feel they still have some control over. They can't stop the sickness, can't slow the fear, but they can block the stink. And maybe that's enough. You return home slowly, tracing your steps in reverse like a thread through a labyrinth. When you arrive, you lay the herbs across your windowsill. A small shield. A gesture. Something. You light one of the candles from the chapel. The smell is sharp. Clove and wax and something citrusy underneath. It fills the room. You sit beside the flame and breathe, eyes half closed. The air feels almost bearable again. Almost like it used to. You wonder how many other people are doing this tonight, burning away the stench of death with flowers and smoke. Not to save themselves, but to remember that there's still beauty in the world. Still colour. Still light. Even if it's just for a few more days. You're halfway through eating a boiled turnip, dry, woody, overcooked, and somehow still the best thing you've tasted all week. You're not sick. That's the new standard for fine dining. As you chew, you look over the jars and bundles lining your shelf. Your apothecary, such as it is. Onion skins, clove buds, dried nettle, 2 feathers, probably pigeon, a chunk of beeswax, and a scrap of parchment labelled anti-plague powder. You didn't label it. It came that way. You swallow and wonder, what even is a cure anymore? People used to trust the healers, the midwives, the monks, the city doctors with their fancy gowns and Latin muttering. Now everyone's a walking pharmacy. Home remedies are passed like gossip. Each new one a little weirder than the last. You visit your neighbour across the alley. She's got a toad in a clay pot and swears it draws the poison out of the air. The toad looks unimpressed. She also drinks thinned urine with mint leaves. To balance the humours, she says. You try not to ask who supplied the base ingredient. Quirky fact. One popular cure was applying a paste made from crushed emeralds to the chest. Expensive. Useless. And, given how many nobles still died, clearly not a hit. You walk past the baker's old house. Someone's pinned a recipe to the door. 7s. Take a whole chicken. Stuff it with leeks and sage. Bury it beside the ill. If the chicken dies, the curse is lifted. 7s. Sure. Why not? Historians still debate whether any of these medieval cures had real medical effect. A few, like vinegar rinses or garlic poultices, might have had mild antiseptic properties. But most of it, fantasy, faith, and desperation. Still, it's hard to blame people. When your choices are sit and wait for death, or rub crushed frog intestines on your temples, you might grab a frog. Back in your home, you look over your own list. Things you've tried so far. 7s. Cold baths. 7s. Hot baths. 7s. No baths. 7s. Onion poultice. 7s. Sleeping upright. 7s. Whispering charms. 7s. Holding your breath near the sick. 7s. Eating only white food for 3 days. 7s. Burning a scarf worn by someone who lived. 7s. None of it helped. But none of it hurt, either. And that's basically a win. You head into town to see what's new. At the square, a man in a feathered hat is selling unicorn horn dust. You ask him if it's real. He winks. Define real. Sevens. Another man swears by a mixture of honey and lead. He applies it to his eyelids, which are now swollen shut. He says that means it's working. In the back of the chapel, you find a woman drawing protective sigils in chalk on the wall. She stops when she sees you. Don't touch anything, she warns. I'm aligning the air. Sevens. You nod. Everyone's got their method. Even you. Your current go-to? Breathing through dried rose petals soaked in vinegar, stuffed into a leather pouch you wear around your neck. Does it work? Not really. Does it smell better than smoke and bile? Absolutely. You walk past the old infirmary. Someone scrawled on the wall, Sevens. If the blood turns black, nothing helps. Sevens. Fair enough. You meet a man from the next village over who claims his town hasn't lost a single person. You ask him why. He leans in close, whispers. We walk backward for 2 hours every morning. Then he nods solemnly and walks off, forward. That night, you sit with your toad-owning neighbour and compare remedies. She's working on a new one. A syrup made from quince, goose fat, and burnt wool. You both stare at it in silence. Finally, she says, we should probably pray instead. Sevens. You both laugh. Hard. First time in days. You return home and crush a clove between your fingers. The smell cuts through the damp. You add it to your anti-plague powder. Just because. And as you settle into your blanket, you wonder. Sevens. Maybe the cure isn't what you smear on your skin or stuff in your nose. Maybe it's having something, anything to believe in when the world is falling apart. Even if it's just a toad in a pot. You wake to the sound of bells, real ones, not the distant or mournful toll of death carts. These are sharp, loud, persistent church bells. Someone's trying to get everyone's attention. You pull on your cloak and hurry outside. People are gathering in the square, blinking against the morning sun, drawn like moths to the sudden sound. You haven't seen this many bodies in one place in weeks. And standing at the steps of the chapel is Father Renard. You didn't even know he was still alive. He looks thinner, older. His robes hang loose on his frame, but his voice carries like it used to, loud, clear, and wrapped in fire. The Lord tests us, he shouts, arms raised, and we must prove we are worthy to survive his judgment. Sevens. You've heard this before. From him, from others. It's the same fire and brimstone playbook that's been dusted off since the first rat dropped dead. But today, his tone is different. Frantic. Wild. This isn't a sermon, it's a scream for control. He says the plague is punishment for pride, for vanity, for unclean thoughts and impure deeds. He lists sins with rapid-fire precision. Drinking, gambling, bathing too often, not bathing at all, letting your wife speak too freely. Half the crowd nods. The other half shifts uncomfortably. He ends with a warning. If we do not change, we will not survive. Sevens. And then, like that, the bells stop. You walk away before the crowd disperses. You've heard enough. Historians note that the church, already powerful, became both a refuge and a source of panic during the Black Death. Some priests offered comfort and buried the dead with compassion. Others fanned the flames of terror, blaming sin, heresy, and vague moral decay for the plague. You stop by the chapel door. It's been scratched up, symbols etched into the wood. Some are crosses. Others, you're not sure. The pews inside are mostly empty. A few old women pray aloud. A teenage boy sits in the corner, carving something into his arm with a nail. You turn away. Back outside, people are whispering again, but not about symptoms. About salvation. About demons. About signs. One woman says she saw the Virgin Mary in the flames of her hearth. Another swears a lamb was born with 2 heads and spoke Latin. You pass by a small shrine someone set up by the well. A wooden cross. Flowers. A cup of wine. A crude drawing of a man kneeling, head bowed. Below it, someone has written, 7s. Pray harder. 7s. Quirky fact. Some clergymen during the plague stopped giving last rites, not because they lacked faith, but because they were too overwhelmed. In places like Avignon, the Pope had to consecrate entire rivers to serve as makeshift burial grounds when cemeteries overflowed. You head toward the river and see 2 nuns scrubbing linens in the shallows. One of them sings softly, something in Latin. It sounds beautiful, peaceful, until she stops and begins coughing into her hands. They pack up quickly. She doesn't look back. You keep walking, feeling the weight of all this religion pressing down on the town. For some, it's structure. For others, it's guilt. And for a few, like Father Renard, it's a weapon. You remember how full the chapel used to be, how people sang hymns, shared bread, kissed icons. Now, no one touches anything. Communion wafers are left in bowls. Water fonts are dry. Faith has gone contactless. And the message has changed. It's no longer about grace. It's about worthiness. You stop by your home and light a candle, not because you believe it'll help, but because it's the only ritual that still feels safe. You whisper a prayer, not to anyone specific, just out into the world, into the dark. You think about those who died with no one to bless them. No cross, no psalm, just silence. You wonder if faith helps, or if it just gives shape to the fear. Historians still argue over how the plague reshaped religion. Some say it fractured the church's power. Others claim it made faith stronger, more personal. In some regions, new sects rose. In others, people abandoned worship entirely. The one thing everyone agrees on? Something changed. That night, you dream of fire falling from the sky. Not hellfire. Not divine wrath. Just the sky cracking open like a bell, and nothing coming out. You wake up still holding your candle. It's burned all the way down. You stare at the wall. Not because it's interesting, because it's moving. Tiny shadows skitter across the plaster, curling at the corners like fingers. You blink hard. They vanish. For a moment. Then they return. You rub your eyes. Still there. You're not sick. You're almost sure. No fever. No swelling. But something else has settled in. Something in your head. The plague may have ravaged bodies, but what it's doing to the mind, that's the part no one's talking about. Not openly, anyway. You've started forgetting things. Little things. The names of herbs. The exact way to lace your boots. Where you put the pot last night. But you remember the bad things with stunning clarity. The way your cousin looked just before she collapsed. The sound your neighbour made when the buboes burst. The smell of the death cart that one time it tipped over. Historians still argue whether the Black Death caused long-term psychological trauma, or if the people of the 14th century simply didn't have the luxury to reflect on it. But you're living it. You feel it. This is trauma etched into the grain of your thoughts. You walk to the chapel and find the wall paintings smeared. Not defaced. Just wrong. The saints' faces are blurred, like someone tried to wipe away their eyes. One angel now wears a twisted grin. Or maybe that's just your imagination. You've heard whispers of people painting visions. Entire walls covered in skulls, weeping suns, rivers of teeth. Art no longer praises heaven. It mirrors fear. In one village, a man carved dozens of tiny coffins out of wood, then filled them with painted clay figures, each face frozen in terror. He placed them in his windows like decorations. You saw them once. You haven't slept well since. You pass by a boy scratching symbols into the dirt with a stick, He's humming a tune that doesn't exist. You ask what he's drawing. Protection, he says. From dreams. 7s. Right. You move on. Inside your own home, you notice how quiet it's become. Not just outside. In you. Like a part of you has gone underground. Hiding. Waiting. You used to laugh. Not often. But still. Now you haven't smiled in weeks. Your reflection looks like a stranger, one who squints too much and holds their shoulders high, like waiting for a blow that never lands. Quirky fact. Some survivors of the plague were recorded as developing severe phobias of touch, loud noises, or even colours, especially black or red. Others reported hearing voices or dreaming the same nightmare for months. You know someone who stopped speaking altogether? He just draws circles on walls now. Big ones. Over and over. Art across Europe has shifted. Skeletons dancing with peasants. Corpses whispering to kings. Flowers blooming from skulls. You've seen some of it, drawn hastily on shutters and stable walls. It's not macabre. It's a warning. A reminder. Death is everywhere. And sometimes he's smiling. You sit by the fire and notice your hands are trembling. Not from cold. From exhaustion. From holding everything in for too long. You remember a woman in town who insisted the plague was alive. Not just a disease, but a mind. Something that learns, adapts, whispers. She spoke to her own shadow. Told its secrets. They found her at the river, humming lullabies to the current. You don't know if she was wrong. Historians suggest that Europe's obsession with memento mori art, images reminding you of death's inevitability, was supercharged by the plague. But they also wonder if it wasn't just a cultural shift. Maybe the human brain, collectively, just cracked a little. You curl up in your cloak, eyes wide open. You're tired. Bone deep tired. But you don't want to sleep. Not because of nightmares, but because dreams now bleed through into the day. You see things. Shadows that don't move right. Faces that linger too long in windows. A woman walking down the road in white, who vanishes when you blink. You've started keeping a candle lit even during daylight. It's not to ward off plague. It's to remind you that you're still here. You whisper a name you barely remember. Your brother's? A friend's? You don't know anymore. The syllables feel like someone else's shoes. That night, you dream of a feast in a cathedral filled with skeletons. They pass you plates of gold, empty goblets, and when you drink from one, you wake up biting your own hand. It's bleeding. Barely. But it's real. And in a world unravelling at the seams, real is the rarest medicine. You sit at the window, staring down the road you've seen so many people vanish into. Some walked. Some were carried. Some fled in carts packed to the brim with blankets and candles and dried meat and crying babies. None came back. But now there's movement again. Not a person. A flag. Red and gold, fluttering at the hill's edge. Then a bell. Not the solemn toll of death, but a clang, sharp and urgent. A new caravan. You squint, step outside. People are arriving. Not many, just a handful. Their faces look worn, but not sick. They call out names. Is there a healer here? Anyone left from St. Dunstan's? We bring salt and iron. Do you trade? 7s. And just like that, the plague returns. You didn't think it could come back. Not after everything. Not to this town again. But it does. Historians remind us the Black Death wasn't a one-time event. It came in waves. The first in 1347-1351. But then again, and again. Sometimes years apart. Sometimes decades. It smouldered like a fire under ash, ready to flare up with the right wind. This time, it's smaller, slower, Less of a flood, more of a leak, but still deadly. You hear that a boy from the caravan collapsed yesterday. His sister is coughing. The innkeeper they stayed with hasn't opened his door today. You feel it start all over again. The tension, the paranoia, the whispers. One woman near the well says, "But we already had it." Another answers, "Maybe it changed." Sevens. You overhear a trader mutter that this version seems meaner. Less fever, more bleeding. One man claims it came from the south, hitching a ride on a fleet of silk caravans. Another blames crows. You return home and repack your herbs, your vinegar cloth, your rose water. Not because you believe it'll help, but because it feels like putting on armour. Quirky fact. In Milan, city leaders reacted to the second outbreak by sealing infected homes with bricks and guards. Some families starved inside. The plague slowed. Morality and survival, neck and neck. You dig out your own hammer. You consider boarding the windows. Instead, you head for the edge of town. You find a priest, young, new. Not one you recognise. He's marking doors with ash. Not crosses. Just lines. You ask what they mean. He says, 2 lines is quarantine, 3 is surrender. Sevens. You pause. Ask what one means. He looks at you. Hope? Sevens. Right. You ask for one. He nods, drags a single mark across your door. You stand beside him, watching the newcomers unload. One has a cart of onions. Another carries a newborn. Someone plays a flute, poorly, but still, it's music. You feel the wind shift. Cold, damp, unsettled. And you wonder, are you watching survivors? Or just the next round of names for the pit? Historians still argue why the plague kept coming back. Was it the same strain? A mutation? Did the climate help? Did the rats never leave? Or did it simply become part of the ecosystem, lurking in soil, fleas, memories? Whatever the reason, you know one thing. Sevens, it's not over. It never was. Even now, decades later, people speak of it as the plague, like it has a proper name, like it's not just a disease, but a season, a character in the story of the world. And here it is again, pulling up a chair, knocking softly on the door. You spend that night listening, not sleeping, waiting. And in the distance, a crow calls 3 times, like a bell. You walk the edge of town at dawn, boots sinking into damp earth, breath fogging in the chill. The fields are quiet. The air smells of frost and wood smoke, with just a hint, almost imagined, of old ash. Not from the fires burning now, but the ones that never fully went out. You stop at the top of the ridge and look back. What's left of your town huddles below you. A few columns of smoke from chimneys. A curtain flapping from an upstairs window. A child chasing a chicken across the square, barefoot, laughing. That sound makes your throat catch. How did you make it? That's the question you keep circling. Not just, how did you survive the disease, but everything else, the chaos, the fear, the endless unravelling of the world you thought was stable. How did any of you survive it? It's easy to point to the symptoms. The fever, the cough, the buboes, the bacteria, the fleas, the rats. Science will always hunt the root cause. Historians love their chains of events. Scholars line up dots and draw clean, logical arrows. But you were there, and you know the truth isn't that neat. It wasn't just a germ that made the Black Death so deadly. It was everything breaking at once. The food shortages from years before. The crowded cities, filthy and frantic. The war and poverty that made people too weak to fight off a splinter, let alone a superbug. The doctors reading stars instead of symptoms. the priests running from their own faith, the rich locking gates behind them and thinking that would hold. It was medicine that didn't work, information that came too late, fear that spread faster than the fever. Historians still argue which of these made the difference, which ingredient turned a crisis into an apocalypse. But you think it was the speed, the way it all came crashing down, and no one, not the kings, not the scholars, not the healers, had time to adjust. One day, it was rumours. 2 weeks later, the town square was a graveyard. The plague wasn't just a sickness. It was a stress test. And everything failed. Quirky detail. In some towns, people reportedly offered their homes to the sick as a kind of challenge. If the Lord wishes me gone, so be it, they'd say. Then they'd host 5 infected guests and somehow not die. One guy became a local legend. Others, not so lucky. You start back down the hill. Every step feels heavier, not from fatigue, from memory. You pass the chapel. New paint covers the soot marks. Inside, the altar's been scrubbed clean. A small group sits quietly, heads bowed. The new priest doesn't shout. He just reads a psalm about endurance. It feels less like a sermon and more like a reminder. You pass the baker's old home. Someone's moved in. There's bread in the window. You almost cry when you smell it. Warm, yeasty, real. And then the wind shifts, and for a heartbeat, the scent is gone, replaced by dust and distant ash. Still there, still lingering. You know the plague will return. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but it doesn't matter, because it's part of the system now. It's in the stories, the scars, the shape of how people build their lives. You reach your home, open the door, and step inside. Your herbs hang in neat rows. Your bed is made. A candle burns low. A small pile of cloves sits on the table like tiny shields, still waiting to be useful. You sit down, press your hands together, and just breathe. The air is clean, for now. You are alive, for now. And that's enough. So now, as the fire crackles low and the night draws in around us, you feel the weight of it all settle like dust. The plague didn't just leave bodies behind. It left questions, changes, wounds you can't always see. But you're here, listening, breathing, remembering. You survived more than disease. You survived a world that cracked open. And in the quiet that followed, you learned how to live differently. Let your thoughts soften now. Let the ghosts of fear float back into the shadows. You don't need to hold the whole story anymore. Just a thread. Just enough to remind yourself that people endured, and you will too. Close your eyes. Let the weight of blankets press gently over you, like the earth sheltering seeds. The air is still tonight. The danger has passed, for now. All that remains is a silence filled not with dread, but with rest. You've walked through fire and famine and fear. Now you deserve peace. Just for a while. Just long enough to dream of sunlit fields, of clear rivers, of faces that smile without worry. And if the shadows stir again, if the bells toll once more, you'll be ready. Because you've been here before. You made it through, and you're still here. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.